Look how far we've come, all the things we've done. Did it all with love, beauty from the bottom up. All I want is you, you're my favorite view. But there's nothing more, girl, you make my heart beat.
And we are back.
Welcome back, you beautiful creatures.
We're going to be doing some Friday content for you guys. This is going to be an article that we pulled off of medium.com. The train wrecks of articles on this website sometimes tend to can be gold mines of information and create great discussions. And we found one on here that is a member-only story, and it is written by somebody who has a PhD. It is called The Impact of
Authoritarian.
You want to read that?
The impact of authoritarian parenting on trauma responding. How rigid rules, excessive demands, and an inability to be ourselves influence 3 types of responding. Trigger warning, the following content includes personal experiences and discussions around difficult topics such as trauma, emotional challenges, childhood maltreatment, or abusive relationships. While my intent is to educate and share personal insights, some readers may find certain content emotionally distressing. This article is for informational purposes only.
And our response to said article is for entertainment purposes only. We are not professionals. This chick is, though.
Yes. As kids, we probably weren't focusing too much of our attention on how we were being raised or on the adults in our lives who had power and control over us. Granted, most probably grew up in an environment where punishment was doled out only when necessary, and where memories of being loved, encouraged, guided, and wanted outweighed any reprimands received. For the rest of us, our experiences were different, harsher. Words like authoritarian may not have rolled off our tongues as kids, but as adults, we can now nod along in recognizing this type of parenting and its effect on our lives. The reality is that the word authoritarian is not always taught in school. Kids aren't learning how to differentiate between authoritative, warm, sensitive, and structured parenting, laissez-faire, negligent, permissive parenting, and authoritarian, abusive, narcissistic parenting. For most of us, we can only look back in hindsight and unpack the type of parenting we experienced in our childhood and attach the appropriate label to it. Because we likely didn't recognize as kids that authoritarian parenting is akin to an abusive, violent, controlling, and restrictive environment, we also weren't pairing words like fear and discipline into the equation. And because we weren't thinking of the long-term effects of this kind of parenting on our sense of identity, autonomy, and self-love, we also weren't focusing on other names that fall under the umbrella of authoritarian parenting, such as helicopter parent or militaristic.
You know all those phrases. I didn't know what any of that shit was until we started the podcast.
Really?
I had never heard the term helicopter parenting.
Okay.
Militaristic, like a militant household. I knew that one. Obviously, there's a lot of military men in my family. A lot of military in my family, period. But
yeah,
I would have never, this podcast has done a lot for my understanding of things. The problem is a lot of the podcast and my understanding of things, I realize how wrong people are when they use those terms.
Yeah.
Because they hear it used and they think they understand the meaning behind it, but until they go home and actually dig into what it is, they don't fucking know.
We just knew we had to conform at all costs, and that interruptiveness and a lack of personal space were the norm. How we were raised in our formative years set the stage for how we interact with the world around us, and how we feel about ourselves, including concepts like self-respect, self-love, and self-identity. For many who grew up in authoritarian environments, where rigid rules and excessive expectations were the norm, we often develop one of 3 specific types of trauma responding: rebellion, submissiveness, or avoidance. Each of these responses can become a reflection of how authoritative parenting shaped us. On the far end of the spectrum, we may even
Vacillate.
Probably
just means that you switch between all 3, but I need to know. Vacillate. Alternate or weave between different opinions or actions, be indecisive.
Okay.
That's a good word.
Between all 3 of these trauma responses in a self-destructive dance.
I want to pause on this for a minute. I know we've talked because we've read a lot of books about what it is to go through things as a child and how the first 16 months of your life can actually create mental disorders in a child. But things like the always screaming parent, or the ones who, if you don't get it right the first time, is in your face screaming and yelling, calling you names and degrading you. There are so many things that can create problems with your child. That could be learning disabilities. It could create an anxiousness in them that makes them not learn. It could create a shaky hand or like a twitch, a flinch, even without being hit, because of the aggression being so physically impactful from the words and the aura of a person. I was watching something last night. This is why all this even came up. I was watching something last night that was talking about the invisible electromagnetic fields that everyone puts off. The premise of the show was about how the brain and the heart have its own pulse, and the brain electromagnetic field can only be measured a little bit past the head, but the heart goes out way far. And the earth has the same thing. The core goes out way further than like the surface level in terms of energy. When you have somebody that has an ugliness in them, and that hate is not an up here thing, it's just in their core, and they are just nasty people, that shit can be felt in a moment.
Yeah.
When you walk into a room and somebody's off and you know that they're off, you can feel that. That is that electromagnetic field that they are putting off that lets you know something's not right. When everything is good with people, people's heart rates actually sink. And this has actually been proven across the world, like for people who are interacting like over social media and shit. They've done tests that when things are good, people sync up on an electromagnetic base. The energy levels do. So to have a child in a situation where the parents are being ugly, screaming, yelling, militant, narcissistic, abusive, making people throw their clothes out in the laundry, their laundry out on the lawn, all of that kind of shit, that is affecting them on a molecular level that is going to do a lot more than just the subconscious abuse aspect. Like I said earlier, the shaky hands, the feeling nervous of going into public, all of that shit can come down to feeling that from a parent who starts doing that shit at an early age. All right, guys, as you know, there was a TikTok scare. We lost the app for a whole 12 hours, and we have no idea what the future of the app looks like. And with that, we are very concerned about the loss of our following. We have amassed almost 3 million followers across that platform with all 4 of our accounts. And we are trying to push people to other social media platforms so that in the event that anything happens on one app, we have multiple other backup plans. If you want to make sure that you're not missing any content, we highly recommend that you check out our Patreon.
On Patreon, we have multiple tiers to choose from. Starting at $10, you begin to receive exclusive content. At $15 a month, you get access to our private Discord server where we've amassed an absolutely amazing community of supportive people. And beyond that, we have other tiers to check out, along with my 2 private women's group, if that's something you may be interested in.
Guys, on our $15 and higher tier, you have access to live recordings. We record all of our content 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week, live in front of our Patreon audience, where they are able to chat with us while we're recording. They get to see all the flirting, the outtakes, the hot topic conversations that never actually make it on the podcast. And it's really worth that aspect in itself. We have an After Dark where we sit down usually once a week and have a glass of bourbon, or in Peach's case, a glass of wine and a bowl of cheese. And we have a whole lot of fun conversations, karaoke in the Discord. We finish the lyrics. We literally just hang out, and you guys get to hang out with us. There is a host of other perks, including Zoom calls that are coming for the ultimate tier. So that if you guys are having problems, you can talk to us. It also gives you the heads up on private meet and greets, because when we travel, we try to meet up with people on our Discord on a regular basis. There's a whole slew of other perks that come through Patreon. I highly recommend that you check it out.
The best way to support what we are doing is to share the content. The second best way is to check out our Patreon. Thank you guys for being here. Continuing.
Yep.
The rebel. For many who grew up with authoritarian caregivers, the one thing we share is that it wasn't just about following rules, it was about being controlled. There is always the overarching, often unspoken threat of consequences for not towing the line or blindly conforming to what our caregivers expected or demanded. Growing up, there was no such thing as a personal space. What was mine was theirs. My belongings would be dumped out of my drawers at a moment's notice as one of their ways of controlling me and to see what I was up to.
Mm-hmm.
I quickly learned to keep anything of privacy at school. It felt like I was constantly under a microscope, constantly watched, and constantly judged. I was told how to dress, shamed for wearing something that was not approved, and constantly reminded that I was not thin enough, not attractive enough, not trying hard enough at school. One of my caregivers was obsessed with image and perfection, where I was under their constant surveillance. If I didn't remember my pleases and thank yous, there were harsh consequences because any failure on my part was a reflection on their perfect caregiving. I was constantly compared to my peers and held to unrealistic standards and expectations. If I made a mistake, I was not taught or shown how to do it right, but reminded of my error. This took a toll on me where I developed severe anxiety and depression, the classic withdrawn child.
There you go. I wanted to touch on something. The unspoken rule thing and living in that fear of fucking up is a lot. And that's the anxiety aspect of that. When you have that with your child and they know that nothing's there and there's nothing sacred in the home, it's when they have to start hiding shit from you. You now have a child that will never come clean with anything.
Oh yeah.
Because of the fear of the parent, right? And like that removes every opportunity for them to learn from their shortcomings. Situations where, say they get into a fight at school and the conversation is, well, did you win? No. And like either there's berating or they just stop the conversation. There's no consoling. Well, I'm sorry that you were physically assaulted. I'm sorry that you are in a situation where you didn't feel safe or that you had to defend yourself. You know, why did that happen? There's no conversations, right? Like that comes from the same thing. If your child does not feel safe enough to have a conversation and you are not able to emotionally connect to them and what they're going through, they're not going to be able to work through things. I just had this conversation earlier with somebody about a 5-year-old and what it is to have to explain to them what's going on in your life. Your 5-year-old child doesn't understand the words that you use. They understand bits and pieces of a sentence and their little tiny brain puts it together the best way that they can, or they just say, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. I got it. Okay. And then you go, what did I say? And they go, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because kids do that, right?
Continuing, growing up with rigid and unrealistic demands placed on a child leaves an indelible mark. Because it is impossible to live up to expectations of perfection, many who experienced authoritarian parenting develop deep resentment towards their caregivers and sadly towards themselves. This self-hatred that is conditioned from years of abuse and having been controlled often comes out in horrible choices in friends who use and abuse them, equally bad choices in a partner, promiscuity, substance abuse, or even self-harm, all of which are forms of rebellion and a middle finger to any type of authority. Rebellious behavior walks hand in hand with truancy from school, lashing out or shutting down emotionally, breaking curfew, and running with the wrong crowd. A controlled and harshly disciplined child can become a rebellious kid who eventually pushes the envelope in daring their parents, their teachers, and even their friends to try and control them. Underneath this rebellious behavior is a scared kid who just wants to be respected, given a fair chance to learn things without punishment, and who wants to be able to live their life on their own terms without feeling confined and controlled.
You know, a lot of this is my childhood. You get to a point as a child where you realize that nothing you do is going to be seen as right and that you are always going to be wrong no matter what, and you stop caring. You stop listening, you start doing whatever the fuck you want to do because you realize that there's only so much somebody can do to you. Right? And at some point in your teenage years, the worst that can happen is you're going to get kicked out. Well, if you're fucking miserable being there, so what? You know, you may have a friend whose parents don't treat them that way that may let you stay there for a little while, right? Like you start looking at all the what if options. I had a really hard time with authority.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is for all of this, the reasons in this, but my thing was I will do just about anything if it's from a place of love. But when you start making demands and trying to tell me how to live my life, I'm not doing that because I know better, right? I'm a fucking kid. I'm a man now. I'm fucking 13, 14 years old. I know. You have no fucking idea, but you think you do. You know what I mean? What was it they used to say on the drug show on MTV? This is the real life of a drug addict. You think you know, but you have no idea. No,
I don't remember that.
I'm old. MTV still played music.
Yeah. Well, I remember that time.
I'm older than Google.
Me too, funnily enough. Continuing.
Yeah.
The scars of having been emotionally controlled, blah. Cut that. The scars of having been extremely controlled in childhood are often most noticeable in deficits in self-agency in adulthood. Kids who are controlled to the nth degree often become adults who are deficient in adulting. They may not know how to care for themselves because they were never given the chance to learn how to care for themselves. When everything is controlled for you as a child, it limits your ability to be autonomous in your adult life. Authoritarian caregivers often look at their ability to control their kid as a nod of approval to their parenting. It's not. It's abuse. Authoritarian parenting strips away all Determination. Authoritarian parenting strips away all self-determination and a person's ability to make healthy and informed choices for themselves and their lives. It is destructive to building independence. It breeds complete dependency because of having been taught compliance as normal.
I would, before, obviously this is still on rebellion, but I want to touch on one more thing too. It's not just the parents who over control. It's also the ones who do everything for their children that end up raising adult children. There are people that we know in real life who are almost 30 or in their 30s that cannot function without mom and dad.
Right.
And though they're living on their own, mom and dad still handles every facet of their fucking existence, because without them, they would not be able to function. And that comes from the helicopter parenting aspect of things. Mm-hmm. Little man got a mohawk.
Yeah.
Over the weekend. And I got pomade because he has somewhat wavy hair, and I wanted to show him how to put his hair up because gel is not enough. And I could have lathered my hands up and done the mohawk and blow dried and showed him how to do all of that. Or I can go, okay, take your finger, stick it in there, get it on your palm, and then make it so that it's on your hands. And he did his own mohawk yesterday. And then this morning he went a step further and did it. And then you finished with the blow dryer and helped.
And hairspray.
He's 7.
Yeah.
It's his hair. If he wants a mohawk, he can have a fucking mohawk. But he has to learn how to maintain said hair. He's going to have to deal with the fact that if the pomade starts to run and get sticky at school, he's going to have a sticky forehead. This is life shit. But he now knows how to groom himself. You know what I mean? Like, that's the, I can do it for you, or I can teach you and you can do it yourself. And if you don't like it, you don't have to do that.
Right.
Versus, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's important to recognize that you can make the same outcome from both extremes of that.
Yeah. Continuing, in their romantic relationships, many find themselves paired up with abusive partners who are demanding, passive-aggressive, and highly critical and devaluing of them. They often gravitate to relationships in one of two ways. A, by choosing partners who are cookie-cutter cutouts of their controlling and domineering parents. Or B, by gravitating to unhinged partners who are now equally rebellious, where both parents push each other over the edge out of a fear of being controlled. Where both partners push each other over the edge out of fear of being controlled. The submissive. Authoritarian caregiving also commonly breeds submissiveness and people-pleasing as normal. When caregivers set impossible standards and expectations, a child learns to jump through hoops that are forever moving. The rules of engagement change at a drop of a hat and based on the caregiver's whims. Growing up with unrelenting rules, we learn that disappointing our caregiver is not an option. We also learn that the only way to avoid conflict, or worse, was to fully comply without batting an eye. Survival is achieved by learning how to read our caregiver's body language, tone of voice, and to pair their words with their actions on what they expected and demanded of us. And in order to minimize the carnage, we quickly learn to become perfect and to please and appease their every demand. This was my childhood.
Yeah, I will. So, you know how earlier she said that there are people that had to switch between all three? Mm-hmm. This was also a part of my childhood.
Yeah.
I never knew what I was walking into because I didn't know who was going to be in the house when I got home.
Yeah.
You know, but that's also the discussion of an addict. When you live with an addict, you don't know what version of your parent you're walking in on.
Sadly, when we are conditioned to become a people pleaser, it's never at our own volition. People pleasing is not altruistic or done because we want to. It's done out of necessity to survive. We learned that to minimize any negative repercussions, we tossed out our needs, feelings, or thoughts as insignificant in exchange for making our caregivers happy. Over time, we became scared of displeasing our parents because we'd been on the other side of their rage, anger, and shame. We've experienced their violent outbursts, and we have learned by proxy that the only way we can try to reduce this is by reducing and shrinking ourselves down. When we grow up learning to please others, it is always at the expense of loving ourselves. Each time we say yes to someone else, you're saying no to ourselves. And self-betrayal is what is being learned. Each time we get a nod of approval or a glimpse of external validation, it keeps us jumping through their hoops in hopes of receiving more. The idea of disappointing our caregivers hits us right in our value and worth. And because authoritarian caregivers know all too well how to play a game to their benefit, if we do inadvertently disappoint them, the outcome is being shamed and feeling like a complete failure. Authoritarian parenting teaches submissiveness as survival. We learn that we are not valued for who we are, but instead based on what we do. Performing, achieving, and accomplishing becomes a means to an end and receiving conditional approval. Over time, we learn to ignore our own desires, our own voice, and our own needs just to keep the peace. People-pleasing does not always end when we move away from our authoritarian parents. In romantic relationships, this need to please often attracts partners who are demanding, passive-aggressive, and narcissistic, where we are constantly bending over backwards to please the unpleasable. We end up foolishly believing that we aren't trying hard enough to make them happy instead of accepting the reality that we are with a person who is incapable of being happy. The harder we try to prove we are worthy of love, the more obstinate, the more obstinate and cruel they become as a reminder that they cannot love us or themselves.
A lot. So the people pleaser, I've always stated that comes down to not being able to set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from not having self-worth.
Yeah.
And that makes sense after reading all of this. It just, validates my thought on all of that.
Right.
When you have a people-pleasing child and that's how they live their life, they will live their entire existence not setting boundaries and never truly get to enjoy their life because they're too busy worrying about other people.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Hey guys, little quick interruption. If you're enjoying the content, please leave a like. And also don't forget to comment. We enjoy interacting with you guys and hearing your opinions, and it helps the algorithm.
It's also free to do, and if you really want to help make sure the show continues to do, hit the subscribe button and share the content across your social medias. It costs you nothing, and it greatly helps the show.
The avoidant. When growing up under the constant weight of authoritarian parenting, many of us learn that emotions don't matter or are even dangerous. Expressing any vulnerable emotions can quickly be met with shame, ridicule, or harsh punishment. So we learn to suck it up and to avoid emotion at all costs. One of the hardest parts about growing up with emotionally immature parents where their needs and whims are center stage, it is that any attempt at seeking comfort, love, or validation were met with rage, insults, or silence. That was a big one for me too. I wasn't a rebel. I was too scared of the repercussions.
That was my later years.
Yeah.
The need to, I was almost a people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
But the second part of this, the avoidant aspect of it and the way that I was treated to make me avoidant pushed me to being the rebel. Yeah. I remember specifically there being a handful of times where I did something wrong and was trying to correct, self-soothe, make amends, however you want to word that with my mom, where she would flatly say, I'm not going to speak to you. And then would fucking ignore me until either my stepdad got home or until I had to leave or until I gave up on trying. And like that silent treatment shit, knowing that you are intentionally being ignored as if you don't exist is a fucking lot for a child.
Yes, it is. It
tells you very quickly where you stand. I was a plaything. I was that thing to show off, to do the thing. Look what my son can do. Look at my son. Look at my great parenting. When it benefited them or when they needed like an extra card player or if they needed somebody to drive them somewhere because they had been drinking or whatever, you know what I mean? But like for the most part, I was an inconvenience to my parents. I honestly have, I do. That would have been a lie, but I guess looking back on it, I understand now why things played out the way that they did. But then all I thought was like, it's irrelevant. Anyways. I hate that I can't just have the conversations I want to have because it's still personal. Yeah.
Continuing, children who grow up in these conditions are often grossly emotionally neglected and wrongly learn that emotions are wrong and that we are wrong for displaying them.
Crazy.
Learning avoidance as a trauma response may get us through tough times in our childhood, but it's only a Band-Aid. Ultimately, we become out of touch with what we are feeling, as well as the feelings and needs of others. In essence, we are developmentally delayed where we do not understand how to relate to others displaying a need for affection or compassion, and so we do not know how to provide it. In a similar vein, because we were conditioned to become so out of sync with our own emotions, any emotion we feel is experienced as unsettling, even dangerous. So we learn to keep shutting down out of self-preservation.
The amount of problems that will cause somebody in their future because you're not able to read the room because everything feels like an attack is like a huge detriment to people.
Yeah. The longer we hold on to this trauma response, the more damage it can do to our well-being. In an effort to avoid conflict, we may push others away before they have a chance to hurt us. Many times we can look at the act of being alone as safer than letting someone in, and risk being shamed or ridiculed for showing any vulnerability. We build walls so high and so reinforced that no one can ever get inside. We end up isolating out of a need to feel nothing instead of fearing feeling anything. Avoidance is carried into our romantic relationships where we continue distancing and pushing away. Emotional closeness and intimacy, what we desperately need in our childhood to feel wanted, loved, and cared for, become overwhelming and fear-inducing. We avoid intimate conversation, getting too close to someone, and allowing them to get too close to us. The fear of being controlled, shamed, or harshly treated is what has us keeping everyone at arm's distance, once bitten, twice shy.
Yeah. So that last little bit, when you think about the courting phase, we can close this now because that was the end of the article. When you think of the courting phase and that new lustful feeling and everything is good and it's not super serious yet, and there could potentially be feelings involved, but like it's just new, fun. There's no risk there. You find people that have that last avoidant situation where they are living their life like that. And the moment things get serious, things start to fall apart because they can't commit. They're afraid to let their emotions out. They're afraid to have the hard conversations, or they do commit because things have been so good that when conflict happens, they don't know how to resolve the conflict. They either go to people pleasing, they completely detach. Well, you're just crazy. They could become narcissistic. There's a whole lot of fuck that comes into that from all of that. It's important to let your kids be kids.
Yeah.
You still have to monitor their behavior. You have to monitor their actions because kids are going to do really dumb things and they're going to get hurt. You got to let them get hurt too without fucking dying, right? Like we want injury, but not crazy injury.
Right.
Let them do stupid things in a safe environment so that they can learn their lessons. But you need to be able to allow them to have their feelings. This is something that we're going through with little man right now because I believe he's mimicking behavior that he's seen. And that's why the things that he's currently doing is happening. But when we ask him, why are you doing that? He's like, I don't know. I don't know. And that I don't know answer means that you're doing it on autopilot because this is what you expect behavior to be like.
Mm-hmm. He was also pretty well able to articulate himself yesterday because we asked him, why do you do that? And he said, because I get angry.
Right.
And I don't know what to do with myself because I'm not getting what I want. And he was like, I forget the things you tell me sometimes when I get angry because I'm just so angry.
I don't believe that that's the case though.
Yeah.
I know that your kids will not do what you tell them to do, but they will follow in your footsteps. So if you have a situation where you have a child that's living in one parent's house, that child will take on the behavioral traits of the parents as they grow up. Mm-hmm. Subconsciously, you just mimic that behavior. That's your environment. When you have kids that have multiple households, that character that is being developed is a split between the both. So they might know better, but they're not going to do the better. I do think that there are a lot of things that's happening in him that he just does on autopilot because he believes that's normal behavior. And I have to be careful with the things that are said in all of this. But I think that more specifically, as vague as this is going to sound, I think that specific situation that we were just talking about happened because he's mimicking behavior. But I think that stems from a lack of respect that also plays into the issues that we just read about from being, generational shit handed down.
Yeah.
I don't know. Shit's a mess. When you think of healing generational trauma, you're not healing you. You are stopping the things that have been passed down over and over and over again and instilling new shit that's going to be passed down in the future. And that's what the generational shift is. Otherwise, you're just healing your trauma. Healing generational trauma is stopping all of that. There goes Carrie running through like Ace Ventura with the dog. Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that is what I was getting at. We're only 37 minutes in. You want to interact with the chat for a few minutes and then wrap up?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys have anything you want to bullshit about for a little bit before we wrap up? Abby said, man, all of that out of a 7-year-old, that's incredible. He's definitely learning to articulate himself. There's also conversations that we have with him where he's not able to understand the full grasp of the conversations. Our kids are getting really good about going, what does that word mean?
Yeah.
There's times that I'm like, I don't know how to explain that to you. And I have to Google it. And then I have to find words in the definition that are easier for me to dummy down so that I can give a like example. Mm-hmm. We had a moment last night where we had to explain the difference between a response and reaction. And the only thing I could think to do was hit his patella tendon in his knee to make his knee flick.
Yeah.
And you're like, that was genius. How did you think of that? Like, I was like, I don't know. It's a reaction. Like, If somebody walks up to you, whispers in your ear, and you do that shit because you know they're there, that's a reaction. That's visceral. Like that is a reaction. That's very different than going, wait a minute, there's somebody next to me. I should turn around. Yeah. Right. Like, and I was able to explain that to a 7-year-old. It was a really cool little experience. But Kennedy said she loved your shirt.
Oh, thank you.
It's the dress, the top. Bethany said the same thing.
The dress. It has suns all over it.
Everybody has started referring to Little Man as the pirate.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, that's because of Zach.
It is. Yesterday when he went outside, he came to me and he was like, Mommy, I'm going to go get dressed in armor. I was like, okay, word. Like, you're going to go out there and then protect us. And he disappears into his bedroom and he comes back out like 5 minutes later. And he is not dressed in armor. He has the pirate hat on. He has his
eye patch
on. He put on he has a lizard button-up shirt that he's now wearing as his pirate shirt. And he had the parrot attached to his finger.
Did he?
Yeah. He had a sword tucked into his pants.
That's funny. You know what they did last night? They found an egg on the property that looked to be like a small bird egg. It was tiny. And it had been split in half. And they're like, what happened? I was like, I don't know, guys. You're outside. You have to figure it out. And they went on a whole adventure trying to figure out what killed the bird or the bird egg. And that wasted like 3.5 hours of their day. I walked outside last night to take the garbage to the curb and all the garbage cans had been moved. And like they were behind the air conditioner and they were on a fucking mission to figure out what killed that bird egg.
Yeah. They were being detectives.
It was so amazing. And you commented on it yesterday about how they could go out there and just be children. There's a part of me that laments the fact that our children cannot ride their bikes all over the place the way that I did when I was 7 years old. By the time I was 10 years old, I rode my bike all over the county I lived in. I gave zero fucks. I was crossing major roads even though I wasn't allowed to. Like I was doing all kinds of crazy shit on that bike because that was my freedom. And when as I got older, it just got worse and worse and worse, but it made an independence in me. People who get put on house arrest that stay on house arrest for a long duration of time become agoraphobic. They don't want to leave their home. Being in public gives them an anxiety that wasn't there before because you get so used to living in your bubble that you know you're safe. I don't want the kids to experience that.
Yeah.
But knowing that they were outside yesterday just playing and being kids and not worried about what we were doing and not coming in and out of the house 50 times and they were totally able to entertain themselves gives me a bit of peace that we're doing the right thing because at 6 and 7 years old, they do have that independence to what we're allowing them to have. Obviously, I'm not letting them ride their bikes like that. They're not where I was at 7 years old. Granted, I got hit by a car when I was 7 because I fucking ran a stop sign. Bethany said, I think you guys are doing amazing with the little pirate. He sounds like one of the children I babysit living in 2 homes created 2 different kids and seeing that he had a hard time got to me. Abby said we're buying walkie-talkies for the boy when he goes and plays with the neighbors. I'm so excited. We actually have walkie-talkies too.
Yeah.
Lately been trying to help my cousin detach from a toxic relationship and I've been trying to help get an ex to try to stop drinking like he is. And it's been so mentally exhausting and emotionally exhausting. You are giving too much of yourself to people who don't deserve it.
Yeah.
If you find yourself exhausted after dealing with all of that shit, you're doing too much. This is the making sure that you still have enough battery in you to deal with the rest of your life shit and not giving too much of you to other people. That's speaking boundaries, you know? Kennedy said, I love, how do y'all, I'm sorry, she didn't say I love. She said, how do y'all navigate not yelling after countless times of asking, telling nicely or / telling nicely? It makes me disgusted with myself because I know I'm acting no better than an unregulated toddler. That's everybody is going to have those moments. We had a conversation with little man yesterday. Was it yesterday where I was talking about yelling? I had to explain to him. I was like,
I don't remember.
So dude, I get loud because I'm dad voicing you. And there's a difference between me screaming at you and me, asserting myself in the conversation so that you stop doing what you're doing to listen. I know when I'm doing it that it's wrong. It allows me to back off and apologize. I hear you do it all the time too. That's, I shouldn't have done that. And they say it's okay. And you say, well, it's not okay because that's not how I'm supposed to conduct myself. Those moments, I think, are lessons learned by children that are more valuable than whatever you're trying to stop them from doing by yelling at them, because it shows that you can make a mistake and own the mistake. It shows them accountability. It shows that you are not always going to be on your A game. Another conversation that I had with little man the other day about his homework because he was making mistakes. I looked at him and I was like, do you know why they make erasers? And he's like, no, to erase. That's what he said. And I'm like, dude, because they know that people are going to make mistakes. You are going to do things in life that is not right. And with an eraser, you can just wipe it off and correct and learn. And if you can't learn from your mistake, you're not going to improve. And we had a whole little conversation about that. And like now when he does something wrong, I'm like, dude, it's a mistake. Where's your eraser? Like make it easy. You can do this in a slew of different ways, but it's important to reinstill those things in people because it builds confidence.
I don't repeat myself. I used to. And it would be, I'm going to ask 3 or 4 times and then I'm going to yell because now they know that I'm serious.
Right.
I'm going to tell you something once. And then after that, I'm going to say, I'm not going to repeat myself. So now you have the opportunity to either go do what I asked or told you to get done, or you can stay in the corner. I'm not going to repeat myself. I know that you heard me. We made eye contact and you shook your head yes. And then you made a choice to continue doing what you were doing instead of going to do what was asked to be done. And that has really dialed back the tension that can build up.
Yeah. So in that conversation, I think it's important that the kids understand the why of things. Mm-hmm. If you just tell somebody to do something because you want them to do it, they don't understand the mission at hand. They're just doing what they're told. It's slavery. And when kids understand, well, why do I got to clean my room? Well, because it's a mess and ants and bugs. And do you want spiders crawling in your ear at nighttime while you're sleeping? Like, because that can happen if your fucking room is a pigsty and there's bugs in here. The predators that eat the bugs are coming in your room. So like, there's always, there's also discipline that needs to be explained in that situation. And like, you're learning to be a man and taking care of yourself and living in a clean house. Like there's a whole lot that goes into that. And that's because I said so conversation.
Yeah.
The because I said so builds resentment. If you explain the situation and they understand what they're doing, they're just going to do the shit because now the questions that they have is being answered. And that to them is a lot. Our kids ask why about everything. Well, I answer the question and they'll still say why. And be like, well, did you listen to what I said? Well, what did I say? There's your answer, right? Like Jenna said, tell us something that made you smile this week. I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm enjoying the joyful conversation. What's something that made you smile this week? Besides me. Can't use me.
I don't know. This week has been a pretty rough week.
Monday just started.
Yeah.
How about last week? The last week was rough.
Last week was rough. Seeing that my veggie garden's actually taking root.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting, walking around the property and seeing shit growing. We are definitely in a season of growth right now. I got it didn't make me smile, but I got an enjoyment yesterday getting rid of the car because I feel like I'm taking strides to do things. Last week was a lot for us. Like we both had a rough time last week and it continued for me up until yesterday. And like I started getting over my shit yesterday and I feel way better today than yesterday. I'm tired still, but last week was a lot, especially Thursday, Friday, through the weekend. But our schedules got fucked up. Mm-hmm. Things that had nothing to do with us affected our household inside the house as well as the kids. And when that happens, that chaos becomes a lot. But there's definitely been a lot of things that's happened over the last 6 days, 7 days that I'm very proud of. And I'm using that pride and action as my wins. Started writing my second book. Knocked off $42,000 of debt from our overall debt, which is a lot when you think about it. Had some really good conversations with the kids. Got little man's new bike built. There's been a lot of like small victories that are seemingly just mundane life shit that I'm holding on to as big wins. Some of them were big, but found you new necklaces. Found me a couple of new necklaces. Well, that's just doing life shit. I don't like having downtime.
Yeah, I can tell.
Do you have anything else that you want to talk about?
No, not really.
Okay. Bethany said, I got a new job. That's my win.
That's awesome.
I had a really good men's call yesterday, and this is not a plug for the men's call. I just want to acknowledge that there is a gentleman in there and he'll know who I am, or he'll know who he is when I'm talking about what's happening. He joined our men's group when we first started. He's done a little bit of editing work for us, whatever. But when he first started the men's group with us, everything that he discussed was depressive. Mm-hmm. It was very depressive. And you could hear it in his voice that he was not good. And it wasn't necessarily the words that he was using. A lot of times it was just the tone and the way he conducted himself in the calls. And yesterday in speaking to him before everybody got on the call, he had a moment of gratitude with me. And he's like, dude, I really appreciate all of this. He's like, it's completely changed my life, blah, blah, blah. He said he started doing yoga and all of the shit. And I told him, I was like, dude, you can hear the difference in your voice simply in the inflection and the tone that you're using from then to now. You don't sound like the same person. And it's just a good thing to acknowledge that, like, if people in your life are trying to make change and you see it, enforce that behavior. Let them know that they're seen. Like, take that 5 seconds to just do the thing. Real quick, one last question, then we're done. Mighty Mouse said, we should recognize that we did wrong, especially if your person is trying to approach you and communicate what you did wrong. It's then up to you on how you want to move forward with the situation. It's important to recognize when somebody tells you that you did something wrong, that they're not trying to change you. They're trying to make you understand that you hurt their feelings.
Right.
And you can validate that and have a discussion about what happened and get all of that shit figured out and then discuss the correction of behavior moving forward. But in those moments, people are looking for validation and they need to find better ways to give that most of the time, because that's where the conversations get fucked up. That was my thought on that. Jenna said, I hear that a lot in the woman of the sacred sisterhood. That's awesome. We're changing lives, babe.
Definitely trying to.
Yeah, I think we are. I think that we are fulfilling our purpose as healers.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that being said, guys, remember that you are the author of your own life.
So grab a pen.
And we will see you on the next one.
Bye, guys.